This yacht party is not for people like you. Get off this deck before I have security drag you out." The words did not fall like a whisper. They cracked across the night air like a whip. Laughter died. Glasses froze mid-air. On a yacht glittering with chandeliers and silver gowns, one sentence had turned luxury into a battlefield, and the man standing at the center of it all, calm, tall, steady in a gray suit, did not flinch. He had heard this before. He had survived it before. But tonight, the storm was different. Tonight, the storm was public. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now, back to the man they tried to erase. The blonde hostess stood rigid, one arm stretched out like a barrier, her finger pointed directly at his chest. Behind her, two women in silver dresses exchanged knowing smirks, as if the scene confirmed what they already believed. He held a single ivory envelope, its gold trim catching the lantern light by the pool. An invitation, real, valid, torn apart not by paper but by prejudice. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her tone sharper. "Guests here are exclusive. You do not belong." Each word dripped with certainty, the kind of certainty born not from facts but from centuries of entitlement. Around them, the chatter of the party faltered. One couple near the bar whispered, "Is she really doing this?" A man in a navy blazer raised his phone, recording quietly, the red light blinking like a warning flare. The CEO's jaw did not tighten, his eyes did not dart. He simply said, measured and calm, "Check my name." It was not a plea. It was a command delivered without volume, anchored by something deeper than anger dignity. But the hostess scoffed, her voice loud enough for the deck to hear. "I do not need to check anything. That invitation is fake. Someone like you could not possibly afford to stand where you are standing." The words landed like a slap, not only at him but at every silent witness who had ever been told the same thing in smaller rooms. The air around the pool was no longer festive. It was charged, heavy with judgment and disbelief. And still, he stood there, unmoved, the ocean behind him vast and endless, as if it belonged to him already. The silence after her words did not feel like silence at all. It was the silence of tension, of eyes narrowing and breaths caught in throats. The deck lights shimmered across the water, but the brightness did not soften the atmosphere. Every gaze turned to him, waiting for the reaction that never came. He adjusted his posture slightly, shoulders squared, steady in his gray suit. He held the envelope again, not as a shield but as a statement. "This invitation," he said calmly, "is valid. My name is written clearly. Verify it." His tone did not rise. It did not need to. Authority carried in stillness. The hostess laughed. Not a laugh of humor, but of dismissal, sharp and cutting. "We do not need to verify anything. People like you try to slip into places you cannot afford. Tonight you will not succeed." She flicked her hand toward a security guard standing nearby, a tall man in black who shifted uncomfortably, unsure if he should move. A woman in a silver gown whispered to her companion, "Why is she doing this so loudly? Everyone can hear." The man replied in a hushed tone, "Because she wants everyone to hear. It is not about policy, it is about spectacle." At the edge of the pool, a younger guest pulled out his phone. The red recording light blinked. "This is racial profiling," he muttered. His friend tugged at his sleeve nervously. "Careful, they will take your phone." He shook his head. "The world deserves to see this." The hostess stepped closer, her finger still pointed. "You stand here dressed like a guest, but you are not a guest. You are a fraud. Leave this deck immediately." The accusation carried across the music, which now sounded hollow and distant, as if the yacht itself recoiled from her words. The CEO did not move. His eyes met hers directly. Behind that calm gaze was memory. At 22, he had stood in line at a gala with a paid ticket. The usher had scanned it, then told him the system must have been wrong. "You do not belong," the usher had said then. 2 decades later, the same sentence had returned, different voice, same poison. He took a single step forward, enough to make the hostess falter. "Check my name," he repeated, calm as stone. The guard hesitated. The crowd stirred, and the party, once meant to shine, now felt like a trial, a stage where truth and prejudice collided under the stars. The air on the yacht shifted from tense to hostile. The hostess's smirk sharpened as if she had won already. She reached out, snatched the ivory envelope from his hand, and held it high like evidence of a crime. With deliberate cruelty, she tore it down the middle, the sound of paper splitting cutting through the soft music. The halves fluttered to the deck like broken feathers. Gasps rippled across the crowd. A woman near the champagne bar pressed her hand to her mouth. A man whispered under his breath, "That was his invitation." The hostess crushed the paper under the heel of her stiletto, grinding it into the polished wood. "This is trash," she said coldly. "Just like you." The insult landed heavier than the tearing of paper. It was not about the envelope. It was about identity, about presence, about who was considered worthy to stand on this floating palace of wealth. Every eye on the deck knew it, even if half of them refused to admit it. The CEO did not bend down to pick up the ruined invitation. He did not defend himself. His silence was sharper than any protest. He stood as if anchored, the waves beyond the railing rolling steady and endless. From the side, a young woman in a red dress spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "He had a real invitation. I saw the name on the list when I checked in." Heads turned toward her. The hostess snapped, "Be quiet if you want to stay on this yacht." But the words had already broken the fragile order. Murmurs spread like fire. The event manager appeared, a man in a white dinner jacket, his face tight with impatience. "This is not a debate," he barked. "This is a security issue. Imposters threaten our reputation." He gestured to the guard. "Remove him." The guard stepped forward, hesitation flickering in his eyes. The CEO did not step back. He did not flinch. He simply looked at the manager and said in a low, measured voice, "You are making a mistake you cannot afford." The crowd's energy shifted again. Phones rose higher. Conversations grew louder. A man near the pool whispered, "He is too calm. He knows something." Another replied, "Or maybe he is exactly who they think he is not." The manager's voice grew harsher, desperate for control. "Escort him off this yacht immediately. We cannot have intruders in the presence of our true guests." His words echoed, but they no longer sounded powerful. They sounded afraid. And still, the CEO stood silent, letting their accusations pile like stones. He had seen this mountain before, built by prejudice, layered by arrogance. Tonight, he would not climb it. Tonight, he would move it. The guard's shoes tapped against the deck as he closed the distance. His shadow stretched under the pool lights, long and looming. The hostess folded her arms, satisfied, her chin tilted upward like a judge ready to deliver punishment. The manager stood beside her, barking orders with the confidence of a man who thought the night belonged to him. Yet in the center of it all, the CEO remained unshaken. His breathing was slow, steady, deliberate. He did not raise his voice. He did not plead. He only adjusted the cuff of his gray sleeve as if preparing for a board meeting rather than an eviction. His silence was not weakness. It was strategy. The guard reached out a hand, hesitant, unsure whether to touch him. The CEO lifted his gaze, calm but commanding. "Check my name," he repeated, words crisp and weighted. The sound carried across the deck, and for a moment even the waves seemed to pause. A murmur rolled through the guests. A woman whispered to her partner, "Why is he not fighting back?" The man replied, "Because he does not need to. Look at him. He knows something they do not." The hostess laughed again, harsh and piercing. "Enough with this charade. You think calm eyes and a borrowed suit make you belong here? You are wasting everyone's time." She turned toward the manager, her voice dripping with disdain. "Call the authorities. Let the police deal with him." That suggestion cracked the atmosphere even further. A man near the railing muttered, "For standing on a deck with an invitation?" Another guest shook his head. "This is not policy. This is prejudice." The CEO did not interrupt their whispers. He let the voices grow, let the doubt spread. He had learned long ago that silence could be louder than shouting, that dignity could burn hotter than anger. He thought briefly of a memory. 25 years old, walking into a luxury hotel in New York. The clerk had taken one glance at him, then at the reservation, and said the system was down. Guests behind him were waved through, all of them white, all of them dressed the same. He had left that night without a room, but with a plan to own the very places that once rejected him. The memory faded, and he returned to the present. The guard's hand hovered inches from his arm. Guests leaned forward, phones raised higher. The manager's voice cracked with forced authority. "Remove him now." But still, the CEO did not move. His eyes locked on the guard, steady and resolute. "Touch me," he said quietly, "and you will understand the cost of mistaking silence for weakness." The guard froze. The party, once filled with music and laughter, was now a stage of judgment, waiting for its first irreversible move. A ripple of unease swept through the glittering crowd. The guard's hesitation was visible, his fingers stiff, hovering in the humid night air but refusing to close around the CEO's arm. The manager's jaw clenched. His authority, once absolute, was beginning to tremble. He barked louder, hoping volume could hide doubt. "Do your job. Remove him. Now." Before the guard could respond, a voice cut through the tension. It came not from authority but from conscience. A young man in a navy blazer, barely 30, raised his phone higher and said firmly, "I saw the list at check-in. His name was there. He belongs here." The words cracked the illusion. Gasps scattered across the deck. The hostess spun around, her face tightening, her eyes sharp as glass. "You will lose your seat if you spread lies," she hissed. But her threat sounded brittle. The younger man did not lower his phone. "Truth is not a lie. I was there. I saw it." Another voice joined in. A woman in her 20s holding a champagne flute said softly but clearly, "I do not know his name, but I know what I am watching. This is not about rules. This is about race." The sentence hit harder than any insult. Conversations that had been whispers turned into open murmur. Several guests angled their phones, red recording lights flickering like embers in the dark. The hostess noticed and snapped, "Turn those off. Filming is not permitted." But the crowd no longer obeyed her tone. The CEO remained motionless, his hands folded in front of him. He looked not at the hostess or the manager, but at the growing line of witnesses who dared to speak. His eyes carried a silent acknowledgement, a quiet strength that seemed to give them courage. The manager tried to pull the attention back. He raised his hand, commanding the crowd, "This man is a fraud, a pretender. Security has every right to remove him for the safety of this event." His words were met with silence, not agreement. From the back, an older guest in a cream jacket shook his head. "Safety? He is standing calmly. He has not raised his voice once. The only danger here is the prejudice we are all watching." The energy shifted. It was no longer a simple confrontation. It was a trial with dozens of witnesses. Phones kept recording, eyes kept watching, and for the first time, the hostess's confidence faltered. The CEO finally spoke again, his voice even, unshaken. "You can tear paper, you can call me names, but the truth is not yours to erase. It belongs to everyone watching." The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was judgment, gathering strength with every second that passed. The yacht, once a vessel of luxury, had become a courtroom under the stars. The manager's face flushed red, his voice rising with desperation. "Enough of this nonsense. You are all being manipulated. He is not a guest. He is a fraud. He is wasting our time." His words echoed, but the conviction was gone. They carried more fear than authority. The hostess stepped back into the spotlight, determined to reclaim control. She pointed again at the CEO, her hand trembling but her voice sharp. "This man is dangerous. This invitation was counterfeit. He is here to disrupt and to humiliate us. I will not allow it." Her words cracked across the deck like broken glass, but the audience was no longer silent. A woman near the railing shouted back, "Dangerous! He has stood here quietly while you screamed at him." Another guest added, "If anyone is humiliating this event, it is you." The hostess stiffened, her lips curling into a sneer. "You do not understand. People like him do not get here honestly. They cheat, they lie, they sneak into places meant for better company." That sentence struck the crowd like a lightning bolt. Phones that had been filming discreetly were now raised high, openly capturing every word. Someone muttered, "She just said it out loud. No disguise, no excuse. Pure prejudice." The CEO remained still, his eyes calm, his breath steady. He did not argue. He did not defend. His silence became the loudest voice on the deck. The manager, now visibly rattled, gestured frantically to the guard. "Do not listen to these distractions. Remove him now." But the guard's feet remained planted. His eyes shifted between the CEO's steady gaze and the growing crowd of witnesses. He knew that if he made the wrong move, the videos would show the world. From the far side of the pool, a woman in a red dress spoke again, this time louder. "I saw his name on the registry. Stop lying. You know he belongs here." The crowd reacted. Several guests nodded. Others whispered agreement. The hostess snapped at her. "Be silent, or leave this yacht." But the young woman did not back down. "I will not be silent. Not tonight." The atmosphere was thick now, charged like a storm about to break. The lights of the city flickered on the horizon, but the real spotlight was the judgment forming on this deck. Every second the hostess and the manager spoke, their power drained away. Every second the CEO stayed calm, his presence grew heavier, undeniable. The manager shouted one last time, his voice cracking under strain. "He is an imposter. He does not belong in this space." "Oh." The CEO finally lifted his chin, his words deliberate and slow. "Belonging is not yours to grant or to deny. The truth has already spoken, and you cannot silence it." The crowd erupted, no longer whispering. The yacht was no longer theirs to control. The tide had shifted, and everyone could feel it. The tension snapped like a rope pulled too tight. The hostess, red with rage, made her final move. She stepped forward, snatched a fresh glass of champagne from a tray, and hurled it at the deck near the CEO's feet. The crystal shattered, shards glittering across the wood like tiny knives. Gasps tore through the crowd. Her voice rose to a scream. "You are a thief! You are a fraud! You do not belong here, and you never will. Get him out!" The sound carried past the music, past the hum of the engines, into the bones of everyone present. The words were not about rules anymore. They were not about invitations. They were about identity, about erasure. The event manager joined her, his voice booming. "Security, detain him now. If he refuses to leave, call the police. He will be arrested for trespassing." His finger jabbed the air, desperate, shaking with the weight of his collapsing authority. The guard hesitated, sweat glistening on his forehead. Guests held their breath. Phones captured every second, the red lights blinking like dozens of witnesses who would not forget. One woman, older and dignified, clutching a pearl necklace, whispered to the man beside her, "This is not about an invitation. This is about skin. Look at how they speak to him." Her words did not vanish. They spread through the crowd like sparks in dry grass. The hostess, furious that control was slipping, lunged forward. She shoved the CEO's shoulder with the palm of her hand. "Leave now before you are dragged." The impact did not move him. He stood anchored, solid, as if the deck itself belonged to him. The crowd gasped louder. Someone shouted, "She just put her hands on him!" Another guest cried, "That is assault." The manager tried to cover the moment with more noise. "Enough. He is a danger to this event. He has no right to be here." But his words landed hollow, powerless, drowned by the rising murmur of disbelief. The CEO's silence deepened. His eyes, dark and unwavering, held the weight of every humiliation endured, every door closed, every time he had been told, "You do not belong." This moment was not new. It was history repeating itself. But tonight, history was being recorded. Phones tilted higher. Guests stepped closer, no longer pretending to ignore. The atmosphere on the yacht was not festive anymore. It was electric, charged with outrage, anticipation, and the sense that something irreversible was about to unfold. The CEO finally spoke, his tone low but cutting. "You shattered glass at my feet. You put your hands on me, all in front of witnesses, and yet I remain standing. Ask yourself why." The question hung in the night air. The hostess's bravado cracked, her breath unsteady. The manager's jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed doubt. The crowd waited, restless, sensing the storm had reached its peak. The stage was set for what would come next. The fragments of glass still glimmered under the deck lights when the CEO reached calmly into his jacket pocket. He did not move with haste. He did not flinch. He simply drew out a slim black phone, pressed one button, and lifted it to his ear. The crowd hushed again, every whisper dying into silence. His voice was steady, even quieter than before, but it carried like a verdict. "Activate yacht protocol. Begin immediately." On the other end, a crisp reply came through the speaker. "Understood, sir. Logging the incident now. Security feeds are live. Every word spoken on deck is recorded." The sound of that confirmation was not loud, but it might as well have been thunder. Several guests exchanged startled looks. The guard froze mid-step. Even the manager's shoulders twitched at the phrase, "recorded." The hostess scoffed, trying to mask her unease. "You think one phone call changes anything? This yacht is private property. We make the rules here." The CEO's eyes rose slowly to meet hers. His voice did not rise, but each word was sharpened like steel. You tore my invitation. You called me a fraud. You placed your hands on me. Now every guest, every camera, and every system will remember exactly what you did. The murmurs turned into open voices. A young man near the bar whispered to his friend, "He sounds like someone who owns more than just a ticket." A woman replied, "No one talks like that unless they have power." Ember, the event manager, tried to steady himself. He waved his hand toward the crowd, his tone strained. "Do not listen to this performance. He is bluffing. If he had any authority, he would have shown proof by now." The CEO lowered the phone, still calm, still anchored. "Proof?" he repeated softly. "Proof is coming, and when it arrives, your words will condemn you, not me." The hostess attempted one last jab, her voice shrill. "You are nothing, nothing but a gatecrasher in a borrowed suit." But this time, the guard stepped back instead of forward. His hesitation was visible, and the guests noticed. Phones angled higher. Several people began speaking openly. Why is security not touching him? Why does he sound more in control than the manager? The atmosphere shifted again. The deck no longer belonged to the hostess or the manager. Authority was slipping like sand through their fingers. And all the while, the CEO stood still, his phone in hand, his presence commanding without force, his silence turning into a weapon stronger than any shout. For the first time, fear crossed the hostess's face. She glanced at the manager, searching for support, but even his composure was cracking. He tugged at his collar, his eyes darting nervously toward the guests who no longer seemed on his side. The CEO lifted the phone once more, his voice low and deliberate. "Continue protocol. Confirm ownership details to the registry." The reply came crisp and clear. "Confirmed. Documents are active. Your position is secure, sir." The crowd gasped, and in that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. The storm that had been building all night was about to break wide open. The deck went silent. The words from the phone call lingered in the air, heavier than the ocean breeze. "Documents are active. Your position is secure, sir." It was the kind of sentence that did not belong to a guest. It belonged to an owner. The hostess's smile collapsed into a thin line of fear. Her hand, once pointed with confidence, now twitched at her side. The manager swallowed hard, tugging again at his collar as beads of sweat gathered at his temple. He tried to regain his authority, but his voice cracked under the weight of what had just been revealed. "This means nothing. Paperwork can be forged. He is still lying." The crowd did not believe him. A man near the bar shouted, "If he was lying, why would security freeze? Why would the system answer to him?" Another voice chimed in, sharper, louder, "Because he is the one paying for all of this." The CEO finally lifted his chin, eyes scanning the room with calm precision. He let the tension breathe before speaking. "You told me I did not belong. You tore up my invitation. But you forgot one truth. Invitations are for guests. I am not a guest." He paused, letting his words cut deeper than any accusation. "I am the principal sponsor of this yacht, this event, and everything you see tonight. Without me, there is no party." Gasps rippled across the deck. Several guests turned to each other in disbelief. One woman whispered, "He owns this?" Another replied, "No, not just owns. He created it." The hostess stumbled backward, her face pale. She shook her head violently, refusing to accept it. "No, this is impossible. Someone like you could not—" But her words crumbled before she could finish. The manager tried again, but his voice lacked conviction. "You are bluffing. You cannot prove this." The CEO raised the phone once more, pressing the speaker button. A new voice rang clear and sharp across the deck. "This is the event registry. Confirmation complete. The principal sponsor and financial authority of tonight's yacht gala is standing before you. Any attempt to deny his presence will be considered a breach of contract." The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, shouts. Guests who had stayed quiet now raised their voices, their phones, their applause. The guard stepped back completely, lowering his hands in surrender. The CEO looked directly at the hostess. His tone was not loud, but it was final. "You called me a fraud at my own event. You placed your hands on me in front of witnesses. Tonight, the world will see who was truly out of place." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence around her was crushing. Every eye, every camera, every voice had turned away from her, and toward the man she had tried to erase. And in that silence, panic finally showed in her eyes. The revelation detonated like thunder across the deck. What had begun as whispers was now open commotion. Guests who had doubted him minutes ago were leaning forward, their faces lit by phone screens, recording every second. The sea breeze carried voices that rose in disbelief and awe. The hostess stood frozen, her chest heaving, her confidence shattered. Her polished smile, once sharp and cutting, had vanished. She looked not like a gatekeeper, but like someone caught in the very trap she had built. Her voice cracked as she tried to speak. "This cannot be real. This is some kind of trick." But the crowd did not believe her. One man shouted, "We saw the confirmation." Another added, "You ripped up his invitation. You humiliated him." The weight of their words pressed down harder than any physical force. The manager's complexion turned pale. His authority, once bolstered by arrogance, now drained in front of everyone. He attempted one last defense, his voice trembling. "I did what I thought was right for the event. I followed protocol." The CEO turned his gaze on him, calm and deliberate. "Protocol does not permit humiliation. Protocol does not sanction theft. You allowed prejudice to dictate your choices, and now those choices will end your career." The manager opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His silence was louder than his excuses. Guests began clapping, slow at first, then swelling into a rhythm that filled the night air. Some shouted, "Justice!" Others said, "This is what power looks like." Phones captured the moment from every angle, turning the yacht into a stage where arrogance had been toppled. The hostess backed away until her heels hit the railing. She shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. She whispered, "I did not know. I swear I did not know." But the words rang hollow. Every witness had seen her sneer, her shove, her cruelty displayed without hesitation. The CEO remained still, his phone lowered now, his presence commanding without motion. He spoke to the crowd, his voice steady. "Remember what you saw tonight. Remember how quickly dignity was dismissed because of appearance. Remember who stayed silent and who spoke." His words were not for the hostess or the manager. They were for every person holding a phone, every person who would replay this moment later. They were for the world outside the yacht. The guard stepped aside completely, shame written across his face. A young guest whispered, "This is bigger than a party. This is history being made." The CEO looked once more at the hostess and the manager. He did not raise his hand. He did not shout. He simply said, "Your time here is over." And just like that, the tide had turned. The people who once believed they controlled the night were reduced to silence, trapped under the weight of their own actions, while the man they tried to erase stood unshaken at the center of it all. The words hung in the night air like a sentence delivered from the highest court. "Your time here is over." The crowd did not move at first, but the meaning was clear. Authority had shifted. The man they tried to erase now commanded the very ground they stood on. The CEO lifted his phone once more, his voice calm and exact. "Execute removal of the event staff. Effective immediately. Terminate their access credentials." A second voice, crisp and professional, came through the speaker. "Acknowledged, sir. Processing now." Within seconds, the manager's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his face blanching as the screen flashed red. Access revoked. The hostess checked her wristband, the digital key tied to her role for the evening. It blinked once, then died with a flat tone. Her gasp carried across the deck. The guard's radio crackled with static before shutting off completely. He looked down at the dead device in his hand, his expression shifting from confusion to dread. One by one, every staff member felt their authority dissolve, stripped away by a command they could not challenge. The guests erupted in shocked murmurs. Some clapped, others shouted, "Justice!" The sound was no longer background noise. It was a wave, a declaration that the balance of power had changed. The hostess stumbled forward, her voice trembling. "You cannot do this. This is my career. You cannot erase me." The CEO's eyes remained steady, his tone precise. "You erased yourself the moment you chose arrogance over respect. I do not need to raise my voice. The system has spoken." The manager attempted to step closer, perhaps to salvage his dignity. But the guard, now stripped of authority, moved instinctively to block him, not in protection of the staff, but out of recognition of who truly commanded the deck. The CEO turned toward the crowd. "You all saw it. You all recorded it. This is what happens when prejudice hides behind protocol. Tonight, it was dismantled. Phones captured the moment from every angle. Guests leaned forward, whispering to each other, their faces a mix of awe and vindication. A young woman near the railing said, "I will never forget this night." A man beside her replied, "No one will. It is already history." The CEO lowered his phone at last. He did not need it anymore. His presence alone carried the weight of every system now working in his favor. The staff, stripped of power, stood silent, faces pale under the bright deck lights. For the first time that night, the ocean breeze felt lighter, freer, as if the very air acknowledged the change. What had been a party of exclusion was now a courtroom of justice, and the verdict had already been delivered. The deck of the yacht had transformed into something more than a party. It was no longer about champagne or chandeliers. It was about truth, laid bare in front of witnesses who could never unsee what had unfolded. Phones stayed raised, eyes stayed locked, and silence pressed like a weight on the guilty. The CEO stepped forward, steady as the tide itself. His shoes crunched against the shards of glass still scattered across the deck, each step deliberate. He stopped at the center, where all could see him clearly, and spoke not with volume but with gravity. "You tore up my invitation? You tried to erase my presence. You called me a fraud in front of every guest here. But understand this. I do not need paper to prove my place. I do not need your permission to belong. My signature built this night. My vision brought you here, and my power will decide who remains." The hostess lowered her eyes, her defiance shattered. The manager stood pale, lips pressed shut, knowing no defense would save him. The guard stepped back fully, ashamed of how close he had come to following unjust orders. From the crowd, applause began again, not scattered but united. Some guests shouted words of support. Others simply clapped, their eyes fixed on the man who had endured insult after insult yet never raised his voice. The CEO turned his gaze toward the witnesses, the people whose phones glowed like torches in the dark. "Carry this with you. Remember what you saw. Dignity does not bend to prejudice. Power does not need to shout. Justice does not ask permission. It arrives and it stays." The ocean breeze lifted his words, carrying them across the deck and out into the night. Guests felt the weight of them, a lesson etched deeper than any toast or speech this yacht had ever hosted. Finally, he looked back at the staff who had tried to strip him of his identity. His final words to them were simple, absolute. "You believed I did not belong, but tonight proves the opposite. I am not the guest. I am the result. And this is the last night you will ever mistake silence for weakness." With that, he turned away, leaving the guilty in their ruin, and the crowd in a swell of applause that rolled like thunder over the open water. The party continued, but it was no longer theirs. It belonged to him quietly, completely, and forever. The story ended not with anger, but with power, not with shouting, but with truth. And in that truth, the message was clear. Justice had not been requested. It had been delivered.